Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create this simple clutch bag. Now the patterns for this are going to be available on my website in a PDF format for you to print at home, but they're also going to be available as an acrylic template kit as well. And so the great thing about this design of clutch bag is that it is pretty easy to scale up or down should you wish to make it for larger items such as a tablet or a laptop, and more information on how to do that is included in the downloads with the pattern pack. So that being said, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is get our patterns ready. Now you can either get them in a printable PDF version or in an acrylic template pack. Now if you are using the PDF patterns, my suggestion is that you reinforce them with some card or print them directly onto card. Once your patterns have been put onto your reinforcement card, you can then more accurately cut them out. Then start to transfer them onto your leather and lining materials. And now, as with all our PDF pattern packs and our make along videos, all the information about what leather and material that we use and where we source them and the thicknesses will all be included within those pattern packs. Once your reinforcement has been applied, you can then accurately cut out each of your pattern pieces. Now for my handle, what I'm doing is actually reinforcing that with some bridle leather, and again, all the information about thicknesses is going to be included within the pattern pack information pack. Now when you're gluing, what you need to do is make sure you glue both pieces of the leather or materials that you want to stick together, and then let that go off. So when it comes to the zip pullers, depending on the actual puller that you're using will depend if you need to actually attach one to your zip. So for example, this is the one that I will be using for this bag, and I'm not going to actually have to add anything to it because I can use what's attached. If we were to use this type, however, we would need to add a puller onto that. So I have now got my leather pieces cut out, and now using a hot crease, we're going to crease around each of our pieces. And now depending on what leather you have used will depend on whether you are going to be using an edge stain or an edge paint. Now for me, I am using an edge paint, and I'm going to do one rough coat first, and once that has dried, I'm going to go over it once more. We're now going to attach the logo tab to one side of our outer part of our bag. So what we're going to do with our outer bag pattern is cut out the logo tab area, and then we can use that as a guide to stick our tab onto our leather and then get it stitched in place. We're now going to stitch this on, so you're going to set your dividers to your stitching width, which for me is 1/8 of an inch or 3mm, and then draw all the way around the tab. You can then follow that line around with your chosen stitch marker, and for me I'm using 3.38mm. You can now use your double hand stitching and actually stitch that tab onto your bag. Now when we come to the end of our stitching, rather than doing 1.5 back stitches to finish, what we're going to do is just end them so there is just one thread in each hole, and we're going to tie them off on the back and secure the thread ends there. Now to finish prepping our D-ring attachment, we have some skiving to do. So you can put your D-ring on so you can see what this is going to look like and fold back on itself. Now these legs here are what we need to skive down on the inside down to nothing, and then we can glue this up. Now I am using a mini paring knife for this, but you can use whatever knife you prefer to skive with. We're just going to take the depth down on both of these two legs on the D-ring attachment. Now you may find this easier to skive down if you just skive down a little bit first and take off some of the excess reinforcement that we put on earlier. And now we have skived that, we can put some glue on and set that aside to dry. Once the glue has gone tacky, you can then stick this together, making sure the edges are all lined up, and then you can add some more edge paint to the outer edge of this little D-ring tab to get that nice and finished. So what we can do now is finish preparing our handle. Now if you want, you can put a stitch all the way around up both sides. However, for mine, I'm choosing not to do that because the glue is going to hold this in place. But what I am going to do now is skive the two ends down to half thickness each, and then we can attach the shape. So the next thing we're going to do is attach our clip onto our handle. So what we're going to do is hold that in place, and you can see this is going to be a nice fit here. But in order to get that nice fit, what I actually have to do is trim down this inside a little bit. And you can see there where the end of this circular fitting is. So what I'm going to do is draw around that and then trim that off. And by cutting that off, our clip now fits nice and snug in this turn, butted up to the back of the handle. And what we can do now is stick these together. And to help set the glue off, what you can use is a heat gun, and that's just going to speed up the time for the glue to go sticky. Once your shape has been attached to your handle, you can then mark this out for stitch marking. We want to get our stitching as close to the bottom of the fitting as we can and get that even on both sides. And then once you have your stitch line in place, you can then follow that with your chosen stitch markers. And for me, again, this is the 3.38mm irons that I have. Now for this, I find that using a smaller iron like this 2-tooth makes going around these smaller shapes a lot easier. And you can then double hand stitch your shape onto your handle, starting with one back stitch and finishing with 1.5. And you can then cut your threads. Now depending on the thread you're using, you can either use some PVA glue and put a little bit of glue on the ends just to secure them, or if you're using a poly thread, you can melt the ends to secure them in place. The next thing for our handle is to do some finishing touches. So what we're going to do is sand the edges, and then we are going to re-crease and then re-stain. The next thing we need to do is get our zip ready. So with our zip cut a little bit wider than our pattern, what we're going to do is mark out where we need to remove the teeth. Now you can see on your pattern there are 2 marks for where the made up zip needs to be. Now we're also going to have to be adding on a top and a bottom stopper to our zip, which is going to take up 1 more centimetre or 10mm in the case of this 6 gauge zip that I am using. So what we're going to do is measure this distance here and then minus 1 centimetre from that. We can then mark that on to our zip, and that is where we're going to be removing our teeth till. So our zip length here is 26 centimetres. So our overall zip, when with the teeth trimmed, needs to be 25. So we can just mark 25 centimetres onto our zip. On either side of that mark, we will be reducing the amount of teeth. So to remove the teeth from our zip, we are going to be using some end nippers. And we want to carefully remove each of the teeth up until our mark, making sure we don't damage the ribbon that's inside. Now this is quite tricky to do, so if you are new to this, maybe do a practice first before going onto your actual zip. Once you have removed the desired amount of teeth from your zip, you are now ready to fit the top stoppers, the zip puller and the bottom stopper. Now if you are putting your own puller onto your zip, then you want to make sure you have already done that. You can then attach both the top and the bottom stops. You should now have your zipper looking a little bit like this, and we're now ready to start attaching that into our bag. To help us glue our zip in, what we can do is with our outer template, we can mark on where the zip needs to be with some silver pen. Now when it comes to attaching the zip in, you can either use some glue or double-sided tape. For mine, I'm going to be using the glue, but the double-sided tape does work really well. Now, when it comes to gluing, I actually have this handy glue gauge. You can pick up acrylic ones on Etsy, and what this does is just allow me to pop this on top of my zip, and I can easily see now where I can glue. And so I'm choosing to glue just behind where this gauge is to make sure there won't be any glue showing once the zip has been stitched into our bag. And once you have glued your zipping tape, you can then glue your bag. Once your glue is nice and tacky, you can then attach the outer part of your bag. So again, I'm going to put my gauge in place. And so you should now have something that looks a little bit like this. And what we're going to do is work on these ends to get them tucked in and out of the way for when we put our lining in. So we want something that looks a little like that. So this ribbed end is coming around at an angle and it's going to get stuck down and will be nice and out of the way. Now this bit is quite tricky as the zip tape has a tendency to just want to ping back up. So what you can do is when you have them stuck down where you want them, put some heavy weights on this to keep them in place. And so for my lining, I have actually chosen to use some linen in this awesome bright pink colour. Now because it is obviously a fabric, the edges can fray. So what I have done is folded the edge over. And there is an allowance on the pattern for that. So, as you can see, I've drawn my line across here where I want my double-sided tape to go, because I'm going to actually fold it over with that. And then I can fold it over and tape that down before attaching it into the bag. And once you've got your lining prepped, you can now glue that into your bag. And again, here I am using my little gauge so I know where to glue to. Now, as I am using linen, what I'm going to do is just glue the bag only rather than the lining. because I don't want the glue to soak through the linen. Now, I apologise for getting my head in the way of the camera here, but what I am doing is using my zipper gauge as a guide to where my lining needs to be stuck to, sticking it along the zip part of the bag first, and then sticking it down at the sides around the rest of the bag. So now we have our bag looking something like this, we can start to do our stitch marking. So we're first going to mark in and then stitch mark our zip line. And then once you have joined your stitch line on, you can then mark that with your chosen stitch marker. Now, when it comes to our stitching, I'm going to start with 2 back stitches and then I'm going to finish with 1.5. So to stop your bag from flopping over like this when you're stitching, what you can do is actually put a ruler in your clams. So I'm going to put this on the back side of my work here, and then using a little clip, I can hold that up and out of the way, and now my hands are free to do my stitching. So this is the back side of my work. So you can see I've got the ruler here holding the leather and the bag up, held together with this clip, and it is here in the clams, and that's what's holding my work nice and upright and making it easy for me to stitch. So now we have our bag looking something like this with our zip all stitched in nicely. What we're going to do is actually flip it over and then glue around the inside on both sides so we can get that stuck together. And we can also rough up the edges of our D-ring shape and then get those sides glued as well. And so now that our glue has had a chance to go tacky, we can start to actually stick this together. So we're going to start by sticking in our D-ring. So we want to get that in so it's level with the top of our leather and lining here, as well as along this side. And once we've done that, we can just stick the rest of this back together. We want to make sure we get our leather pieces as flush together as possible. And now once we've done that, we can once again go around the edge of our bag with our dividers and mark our stitch line on. And then we can follow that line with our stitch markers. And so for this stitch line, I am stitch marking all the way through, which is why I have this protective cardboard out. And now when it comes to stitching this part of your bag, what we're going to do is do 1 stitch over the edge and secure all our leather together. And then swapping our needles over to do 1 stitch over that top edge of our bag. And then we can carry on and stitch the rest of our bag like we would normally. And now, even though you stitched marked all the way through, you still might need to use an awl just to open those holes up to allow your needle to go through. So you should now have something that looks a little bit like this, and we're now ready to do our finishing touches. So to start with, we're going to sand down the edges to get them nice and flush. And then once you are happy that your edges are nice and flush, you can then recrease around both sides of your bag. And the final thing to do is restain or edge paint your bag. Now, depending on the leather and the lining material that you use, you may need to do more than one coat of this. And what you want to do is lightly sand in between coats to get a nice smooth edge for the paint to adhere to. And now you should have a bag that looks a little bit like this. And the last thing that we're going to do is just open the bag up and with a clean bone folder, just remove any excess glue that there may be in here from when we glued the bag together. And then you can clip on your handle and your bag is now ready to be used. So that is it for this video. Hopefully you have something that looks a little bit like this one and you learnt some new skills along the way. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click that thumbs up button. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing for more videos and tutorials. And I shall see you in the next video.